So let me get this straight. Tom Parker Bowles, food writer, man who writes lovingly about cheese and roast chicken, was driving around London with Princess Diana's private letters in the boot of his car.
Not a safe. Not a vault.
The boot of a black car on palace grounds, on the night of the biggest state banquet of his reign. When Charles lifted that trunk lid and found a folder sitting on top, marked Diana, confidential, the explanation was basically, oh, someone gave them to me.
For a book project. A book project. The man is a food writer.
He writes about bread and ham. And we're supposed to believe the most sensitive documents in modern royal history just landed in his lap as research material. That's the story you're supposed to swallow whole. But here's what nobody tells you. That trunk lid wasn't the only thing opened. When Charles opened the trunk, he opened something much older.
A wound. A war. A ghost.
And the move William made next, 48 hours later, before every camera in Britain, shocked everyone. The press, the public, the palace. Most of all, the man who had just become king. Before we get into all of that, if you love royal drama, the stories that never make the official press releases, hit subscribe. We break down everything the palace wishes you'd forget, and this story, they really wish you'd forget. Back to the mess. Let's set the scene, because the context makes this twice as strange. It was the first grand state banquet of Charles's reign. Golden chandeliers, tables draped in white and silver, world leaders, celebrities. The kind of evening where every smile is rehearsed into nothing. Charles had waited longer than any heir in history, and now the moment was his. This banquet wasn't just dinner.
It was a statement.
Look how steady we are, the palace was saying. William and Catherine arrived immaculate as always, Catherine in a deep green gown that caught every camera flash, William beside her, not smiling exactly.
Controlled.
Then Charles and Camilla walked in hand, her silver gown shimmering, the crowd cheering politely, the way crowds cheer for a woman not fully forgiven. For one night, you could almost believe the fairy tale. And then Tom Parker Bowles pulled up.
Sleek black car.
Sharp suit, carefully combed hair. Another name on the guest list. He stepped out, smiled at a minister, easy, relaxed, almost theatrical. Except to William, he was never just another name, the living reminder that Camilla's family had woven itself into the monarchy.
Her children. Her grandchildren.
You could see it in William's jaw.
Tight. Controlled. Watching.
The dinner went through the motions, string orchestra, toasts about unity and history. Tom sat a few seats from Charles, laughing easily with ministers about food. Some found him charming.
William didn't.
That laughter felt out of place in those hallowed rooms. And Harry wasn't even there. Across the ocean, he'd chosen another life. His empty chair was its own kind of statement. So the night carried an undercurrent the cameras couldn't capture. Polite on the surface, boiling underneath. Here's the detail nobody noticed. Tom barely touched his dinner. A man who writes about food, at the finest table in Britain, and he barely ate. He kept glancing at the courtyard doors, like he was waiting for someone to find it. When the banquet ended, Charles excused himself, needed air. He walked the palace corridors, footsteps echoing against marble, past his ancestors' portraits staring down at him. Outside, the night was crisp. Guards at their posts, silent. Black cars gleamed under the lanterns. That's when he noticed it.
Tom's car.
The trunk wasn't fully shut.
A small gap.
Almost invisible, but enough to catch the light. Here's something you should know about Buckingham Palace. Its security is tighter than anywhere in Britain. Every vehicle gets swept, every boot checked. So why was Tom's trunk open? After a state banquet, in a courtyard full of guards? No one was watching. He stepped closer, hesitated, the way you do when you know some doors are better left closed, and lifted the lid. Inside, beneath a dark cloth, were stacks of documents. Sealed envelopes tied with red string, stamped with government office marks. Papers with no business in a food writer's car. And on top, almost placed there to be seen, a single folder.
Diana. Confidential.
Charles staggered back. His face went pale. For a moment the world tilted, all that rehearsed stability, one folder of a dead woman's secrets, in his wife's son's car.
Father.
A voice cut through the silence. William, in the shadows of the archway, half in darkness. Father, what are you doing? William's eyes moved past Charles to the open trunk, and the shift in his expression was instant.
Shock first.
Then something much sharper. Fury. Everyone watching assumed they knew what happened next.
The shouting. The scene.
William losing control in front of the guards. But that's not what happened. What happened next was worse. William didn't explode.
William went quiet.
And a quiet William is the most dangerous version of William there is. What is that?
Low. Controlled. Dangerous.
He walked past his father and stood at the open trunk.
Didn't touch anything, just looked. At the folder.
At the red string.
At the papers beneath.
Then he looked up, and there at the courtyard door stood Tom Parker Bowles, coat in hand, frozen mid-step.
Tom, William said. Not a greeting. A verdict.
Tom's face went through 3 expressions: surprise, then fear, then a mask of calm that fooled no one. I can explain. Explain what?
Charles cut in.
Why is my wife's son carrying my first wife's private documents at Buckingham Palace?
And here's the core contradiction.
Tom's explanation was that he didn't steal anything. Someone gave him the files, he said, a dealer in rare manuscripts who claimed to have information about Diana, documents worth millions.
Tom didn't believe him at first.
But when he saw them, he took them.
To keep them safe. Safe. In a car trunk.
At a palace banquet. Where anyone could have found them. That's not safekeeping, William said quietly. That's carrying explosive material to the one place on Earth where it could do the most damage. If you genuinely wanted to protect Diana's legacy, why bring them here? Why not lock them in a safe? Why not tell the king the moment you realized what you had? The logic falls apart the moment you apply pressure.
And William applied pressure. Don't lie to me, he said, voice rising.
Those are private files about my mother. Where did you get them? Who gave them to you? And what else is in that car? Tom's answer was the same line he'd give palace lawyers later. I was told they were for a book project.
A book project.
William's disbelief was almost physical. He laughed, a short hollow sound that echoed off the marble. You expect me to believe my mother's personal letters were handed to you for a book project?
You?
You write about restaurants. You wrote a book about forks, Tom.
Forks.
And that line tells you everything. Sensitive documents don't float around the rare manuscript market waiting for food writers to scoop them up. If someone actually had Diana's letters, they'd go to the press, not to the queen consort's son with a cheerful, "Here, use these for your next book about pasta." Charles tried to mediate, torn in two. On one side his son, the future king, voice filled with righteous fury. On the other his wife, the woman he'd fought the world to protect, and her son, tangled in a secret that could bring the crown crashing down. When Charles pulled out a single envelope and opened it with trembling hands, he found a letter in Diana's handwriting.
Familiar. Elegant. Unmistakable.
Fragments of her darkest days. His hand shook.
He barely read on.
William watched, fury building. His father hesitated, that instinct to protect Camilla's family, and it was the last straw. This ends now, William said. We confront this formally tonight, every document audited, or I will. One thing is clear, father. If you protect him or her family again, you will lose me. That's not a threat made lightly. That's the heir drawing a line in marble and telling the king what loyalty to Camilla's family would cost. Let's stay on that contradiction, because it's the hinge of the story.
Safe from whom?
If the goal was to protect these documents, bringing them onto palace grounds was the worst decision possible. If the goal was to reveal them, hiding them in a trunk makes no sense either. None of it lines up, which makes this feel less like an accident, more like something waiting to be found. Someone put that folder on top of the pile. Someone left the trunk unlatched. Someone wanted that discovery to happen. The only question was, who benefits? The timeline shows how fast this escalated from private discovery to public explosion. The confrontation happened late that night. By dawn, the news had reached Camilla. A single message whispered through the halls.
The trunk has been opened.
She sat up in bed and knew what it meant.
William knew.
He'd seen the letters. And her Tom was the one caught with them. Camilla's reaction was pure panic. She clutched the edge of the bed, rings digging into her skin. Diana's letters.
In Tom's car.
This was her greatest nightmare, risen from the grave. The ghost that had haunted her entire relationship with Charles, back in the most dangerous way possible, and William now had proof to fuel a lifetime of anger. She rushed through the halls, every portrait seeming to watch her. Charles stood by the car, gray with despair. Tom lingered nearby, silent and ashamed.
You fool, she told her son.
You've destroyed everything. You've ripped open wounds that never healed. You've given William the weapon he has always wanted. Tom tried again. He hadn't stolen anything, he was keeping them safe. Camilla's response cut through everything. Safe? Locked in a car trunk, waiting to be discovered?
Safe from whom, Tom? From William? From the king? From me.
She collapsed onto a stone bench, sobs tearing through her. He will hate me forever, Charles. He always hated me, but now he has a reason. The crown will slip from my head before it's even on it. And then she said the words that reportedly chilled Charles to the bone.
Diana has won.
Even in death, she has won. That line tells you where Camilla's head was. This was never about documents. It was a decades-long competition she knew she could never win, a ghost she could never outrun, and her own son had just handed that ghost the victory. Now here's where the story splits from everything you'd expect.
For 2 days, the palace tried containment.
Reporters crowded every corner, microphones raised. Is Prince William fighting with the king? Did Camilla's son really take Diana's private letters? The palace issued no statement. Silence, they hoped, would protect them. But silence became the loudest answer of all. Everyone assumed William would do one of two things: storm out and condemn the palace, or swallow it, the way he'd swallowed everything for 30 years, and stand beside his father at the next photo call with a hollow, practiced smile. William chose a third. On the third morning, he stepped out of Kensington Palace with Catherine at his side. Normally he waves, says a few careful words, retreats. Not this time. He walked past the press line, stopped at the gates, turned back, and raised his hand. The reporters went silent. Every camera locked onto him. I will not speak long, he said. But I will speak the truth. My mother's memory deserves it. Then he did the thing no one expected. No inquiry.
No naming Tom. No condemning Camilla.
He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sealed envelope.
Old paper. Red wax. Unopened.
This was found among the documents, he said. It was addressed to me in my mother's handwriting, dated 6 weeks before she died. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Catherine lowered her eyes. William broke the seal. What he found inside, and I should say, this detail has never been fully confirmed, was a mother's letter to the son she never saw grow up. About the life she hoped he would have, her fear that the family would teach him to hide his heart. And one line that reportedly made hardened reporters look away: never let them make you ashamed of loving openly, my boy. It was the only thing I ever did right. William read one sentence aloud.
His voice cracked, just once, then steadied.
He folded the letter, pocketed it, and looked straight into the cameras. I am not here to destroy anyone, he said. I am not here for revenge. My mother loved this country, and she was let down by everyone around her, including the palace. But her memory was never meant to be a weapon. So here is what I will do instead. And then came the move that truly shocked everyone. Every document found in that car will be catalogued by an independent commission. Not palace lawyers, not the royal household, but archivists answerable to the nation. They will be preserved, studied, and in time placed in a public archive, so history can read my mother's words honestly. Nothing hidden, nothing burned, nothing buried. That is her legacy. And I will see it done, whether this palace helps me or not. The palace had prepared for a war, not for a future king who took the moral high ground, turned a scandal into a legacy, and made their silence look like guilt. Within the hour, Prince William turns Diana's letters over to the nation was on every front page. And underneath it all, the question the palace couldn't answer: what else do those letters contain? Charles sat in silence, face pale. Every word cut him deeper. He had begged William to keep the matter private. William had chosen the world instead, not with fire, but with grace. And somehow, that was worse. Facing the greatest crisis of his reign, Charles gambled. Advisors warned against it. He cut through them all. No more lies, he said. If we hide, we fall. If we stay silent, we burn. The people must hear from me. Today. Camilla begged him not to. If you speak of her, you will bury me. Every word you say will place Diana above me, even in death, and the people will never forgive me. Charles looked at her with exhausted eyes. Tonight, he said, I am not a king. I am only a father. A broken father. His speech was short, but every word carved deep. He stood in the throne room, cameras blazing, and spoke not as a monarch but as a man. He admitted the letters had been found where they should never have been, that they had hurt his family, most of all William. Diana was the mother of his children, he said, and she would always be honored, always remembered. Then he said the words that stunned the nation. Any failure to protect her memory is my burden, and mine alone. I ask for patience. I ask for healing. And I ask for my son to forgive me. The reaction was instant. Crowds outside the gates held pictures of Diana and chanted her name, as if she had risen from the grave. Her old interviews flooded social media, her line about being the people's princess. Newspapers ran split photos, a smiling Diana on one side, a tear-stained Camilla on the other.
The people chose sides.
Most stood with William. Some defended Charles. Very few stood with Camilla. Inside, Camilla collapsed, her crown slipping like sand through her fingers. Tom cursed under his breath, knowing the blame would never leave him. William sat in his study with Catherine, listening. When it ended, he didn't cheer. He only whispered, at last. He finally spoke the truth.
Catherine touched his hand.
So, will you forgive him? William stared at the dark night beyond the window.
His jaw was tight. I don't know, he said.
The truth has been spoken. But truth alone does not heal. And that's where this story really lands. Not on the discovery, not on the confrontation, not even on the shock of William's announcement. It lands on a family built on silence and image management, whose walls were broken by a trunk that wasn't fully shut. Tom Parker Bowles may or may not have had innocent intentions. Maybe someone really did hand him those documents. Maybe he really did think he was keeping them safe. But the open trunk, the palace banquet, the timing, the book project excuse, none of it adds up to a clean explanation. What it adds up to is a family that has never dealt with its grief, its guilt, or its ghosts. Diana's letters were locked away for decades, but her memory was never buried. It was waiting for someone to lift the lid. And the questions remain wide open. Who really gave Tom the files?
Why that night? Why that car?
What else was hidden in that trunk? What will William do now, with the fire his mother's memory has reignited in him? The monarchy survived the speech. It survived the headlines.
It survived the night.
But the fracture between father and son, between the crown and the truth, that didn't heal. It just stopped bleeding long enough for the cameras to look away. And somewhere, in an archive that doesn't exist yet, a stack of old envelopes waits. Red string.
Sealed wax.
And a dead woman's words, finally going home.